Okay then, so I was looking through the tutorial. I understand the concept of this research strategy, why it's important, and how I need to do some kind of literature review and so forth. But I came across this term, research paradigm.
Oh.
I mean, even from the days when I was studying to be a teacher, the word paradigm came up about quite a fair bit. What exactly is a paradigm and how does it fit into this frame of doing research? I'm a little bit confused. Maybe you can clear this up for me.
Right, yeah. It's one of those kind of terms that's a bit nebulous. We get
Right.
terms like paradigm, perspective, mindsets, ways of looking at things. Essentially, a paradigm is a world view on something. And we'll start with an analogy here. There was a time when we believed that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything went around the Earth. I don't know whether it was Copernicus or Ptolemy, but it was one of those two characters. And then another one come along and said, no, it's nothing like that at all. So a paradigm is a way of looking at something. And it will contain certain assumptions about the nature of reality. And also, by the very nature of it having assumptions about the nature of reality, it will also have assumptions about the methodology. Now, I'll give you two examples that have really dominated the literature. One is what's called positivism, and that is essentially the traditional scientific method. And the kind of idea is this, is that as human beings, we process the world through our own eyes, for our beliefs, for our sensory apparatus. And the idea of science is somehow to get away from subjectivity, hence the term that we use in everyday life, let's be objective. And it's a little bit like the, have you seen the X-Files?
I'm not really a big fan, but I do know what the concept is.
But there is a kind of saying that is on every episode, the truth is out there. That's right. So the idea is that there is an external reality, and the idea of good science, and this is the very basis of traditional science, is that we study it through a certain type of methodology, the experimental method. And we're able to document that reality, like the laws of physics are considered to be absolute laws, which may apply everywhere in the universe. So the idea is that the researcher, us, we are detached observers, and we capture this external reality using this scientific method of experimental and control groups, and being able to say this is a definite external reality. Now, if we go back to the early years, 19th century even, where suddenly sociologists started to study the social world as compared to the physical world, and they actually tried to use that same method. They were looking for social laws. In other words, maybe the social world that we live in, human behaviour, follows the same principles as a physical world. Like if I drop something now, it will drop because of the laws of gravity. And that was one big paradigm in research. And it still is the paradigm in the natural sciences to a large extent.
So my question here now would be is, what then would be the paradigm for my research, which is flipped classroom?
Right. Now then, increasingly now that we recognise the difference between human beings and physical objects is that physical objects don't have any kind of consciousness. They don't choose their behaviour. If I drop a pen on the floor, it doesn't say, well, I don't really want to drop on the floor.
How do we know that?
I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's right. Now, there is, there's even a critique that we can be objective about the physical world, but we know that when you're dealing with human actors, they've got their own minds, their own motives, and they're not going to behave in accordance with any totally predictable laws. What we do know is that we can sometimes make probabilistic statements. Like, for example, when people win the lottery, if it's a lot of money, they're usually happy. When people have a bereavement, they're usually sad. But it's not an absolute, and it varies from place to place, culture to culture, and person to person. So the big point is that when you're doing social research, you've got to remember that human actors, like the kids in our classroom, some days they just might not be in the mood. One or two individuals may disrupt the class. So it's not totally predictable. And our very presence, and this is the big point I think, and we'll go on to look at this in more detail, that in social research, our very presence as the researcher will influence the research. In other words, if we're doing research, the students may behave differently. And they may behave differently for you than me because I'm a Westerner and you're a local person.
A good-looking local person.
Well put, yeah, that's right. Yeah, those things come into play.
Right.
So we recognise now that it's impossible to apply a positivistic paradigm, that we're going to find absolute laws. But we can understand the reality better through good systematic inquiry. So the new kind of paradigm that is prevalent in social research, and the only one that's really most useful, is to have a more interpretive paradigm. Yes, there is real things going on, but they can never be fully understood in purely absolute terms. So we try to interpret what's going on and be able to, through our research, get a deeper understanding. So in educational research, for example, we can look at the flipped classroom, we can look at how the students feel, how they respond to it, how much they learn, and we might find things that give us a good idea of how we can design this learning environment, the flipped classroom, better. Now that don't mean that every student is going to learn better because we do it, but if we can say, look, if we do it this way, that way, we do these things, we provide this, more students buy into the experience.
At least it gives me a more informed way of doing it rather than to just basically just throw darts and just hope for the
best. That's
best.
the basic thing. So the paradigm thing is just a set of assumptions about how far we can go in understanding reality. When we're dealing with people, it's not going to be discovering laws. So when you do your research, you've got to be careful to say, I've done this research and this is how it works and this is absolute, and if we do this, this definitely happens. You need to say, based on this situation, in this context, based on this data, these group of students have shown that these things tend to work better because. Now, if you can then connect that to our knowledge about the way people learn, in other words, that's where your literature research is really, review is really important, because you can connect it to other people's work, to what we know about human learning, and that's what makes your research really useful.
Understand.